On page 877 of the biography of the great men of the Lenoa continent, it was said that there is one whom rumor has bestowed with numerous epithets and awarded the highest love and respect. The star of the empire was an unprecedented spiritual magician, and at the same time an unsurpassed strategist. She was the greatest guarantee of all existence. It was a girl named Ivelia Artina. Ivelia was the youngest daughter of the Artina family. She had blonde hair and beautiful blue eyes. Not only the rulers of the empire, but even the highest demons and spirits bowed their heads before her. All the roads she walked along were strewn with flowers. The traces she left behind were her achievements. But on the other hand, the girl wanted the simplest things. Ivelia simply dreamed of loving and finding her little happiness. They say that she had a very strong connection with a man who was next to her for a long time. In a sense, you can say that she achieved what she wanted more than anything in the world. A girl in a business suit remained motionless underwater. She assumed she had died and wanted to know how it happened. Walking through the city with a bag on her shoulder, the girl looked very exhausted. She thought about how very tired she was. The girl walked past the river and noticed how someone in a white dress, as if emitting a bright light, was moving deeper into it. She loudly warned the man to be careful in the water. A moment later, she decides to save the stranger. The girl leaves her bag and rushes into the water. She approaches the girl in the dress and tries to grab her, but her hand goes right through her. The girl lost her parents early. After their death, her relatives took her. It was difficult to call it life, but rather survival. She was often beaten, and hiding from creditors became commonplace, and only study was the only hope for the girl. Even if the girl's life looked more like a scorched desert than a flowery fairy tale alley, she still hoped that she could walk along it. But apparently she was unlucky in this life. Once underwater, she drowns, but after some time she comes to her senses and opens her eyes. The girl seems to pass through water and ends up in an unusual place. She is very excited and does not understand where she is and wants to know what this place is. The girl suggests that this may be the afterlife. At first she thinks that this is heaven, but then she admits that this is hell. The girl guesses that this is due to the fact that she died without paying off her debts. After looking around a little, she thinks it over again and assumes that this is not hell after all, but still cannot understand what kind of place this is. The girl turns around and sees a smartly dressed man with long white hair. The stranger tells her that at least hell is not here. She is very surprised and sits down on her knees in front of him. The girl assumes that this is God, but she cannot be sure, and it seems to her that he is not an ordinary person. The man considers the girl a very unusual person and says that his energy has no influence on her and admits that she is very stupid. The girl is surprised because everyone thought she was smart. He notices that the girl does not shine with her intelligence because he has not yet met a person who, in an attempt to save a spirit, would throw himself into the water and end up drowning himself. The man waves his hand and a glowing star appears. He explains to the girl that this is the spirit of water, which accidentally slipped into the passage between the worlds that he opened and ended up in her dimension. The star turns into a small, glowing spirit with a large fishtail. The man says that the girl accidentally noticed his baby and unknowingly decided to rush into the water to save her. The little spirit approached the girl, and she was able to take a good look at him. She realizes that she died trying to save the water spirit. This may seem like a completely unfair and insignificant death, but it is not. There was nothing in this world that she loved or regretted. The spirit returns back to the owner, and the girl asks the man if everything is fine with that spirit in the end. The stranger replies that fortunately, everything is fine with his charge. The man explained that spirits cannot live where no one believes in them, and, once in her dimension, they will face inevitable death, because in the girl's world, there is no one who believes in spirits. He said that in an attempt to save his child, the girl jumped into the water without hesitation and found faith, thanks to which the little one was able to avoid a terrible fate. The man thanked the girl for this and said that he was very sorry that she lost her own life in the process. The girl admitted that she didn't have much to lose. The man believed that she could not just lose her life because he was one of those who always gives back exactly what he received. He said that since the girl lost her life saving his baby, it means that the price for the girl should also be life. The little spirit flew up to the girl again and the man added that they owed it to her. The man explained that he wanted to give her a new life. The girl was surprised and assumed that he meant that she could be reborn. He confirmed her guesses, but warned that in return the girl would forget everything about her previous life. The girl understood this and thanked the man for his concern. In her life, she had never asked God for anything, and now there was something for which she was ready to beg him on her knees. The girl asked to make sure that in her new life she would be surrounded by the love of her family. Then she added that if this was not possible, then she would prefer not to be born at all. The man smiled and replied that the girl was one of those who deserved love. In the evening, a duke named Hugo von Artina was in the house. It was a young blonde man. That evening he was very excited about something. A blonde boy came into his room, looking a little worried. This was the second son of the Artina family, named Cedric von Artina. The boy asked the duke to rest a little and reassure the man that everything would be fine with his mother. The duke replied that he was fine and there was no need to worry about it. Cedric asked for forgiveness for his words and admitted that he was a little uneasy. The father could also be understood, because 7 hours had already passed since the mother went into labor. During this time, they still have not heard the child cry. The duke went to the door and listened. He was sure that everything would be fine with her and the child. Suddenly, a child's cry was heard, which everyone had been waiting for. The duke and the boy were very excited, and it seemed that the child's cry was like thunder from heaven. The man opened the door to the room and saw his wife, Alicia Artina, who was holding a child in her arms, and servants gathered around them to help with the birth. The woman looked at her husband, then smiled and said that everything turned out exactly as he wanted, and they would have a daughter. Alicia held the child out to show the duke. Hugo took the girl tightly with both hands and began to examine her. He was very happy about the appearance of this child. The man told the girl that if she fell on hard times, they would be there for her. The servants at that moment were very moved by what the duke was saying and cried with happiness. The duke added that if difficulties arise on the girl's path, he will strew this path with flowers, even if this means cutting off all the flowers in the world. At that moment, Cedric approached them. The whole family happily gathered around the girl and looked at her. They were very grateful that she came to them. At this moment, a man from the spirit world was watching what was happening, while remaining invisible to people. He smiled and said that they would see each other again. After some time, the girl lay in her crib and looked at the chandelier, which was richly decorated with precious multicolored stones. The child thought that he was bored and could no longer play staring contest with these hanging rattles. The girl began to cry, and the maids who were in the room became alarmed by this. The maids were very excited and wanted to know the reason why the little lady was making such strange sounds, and assumed that something was hurting her. One of the maids suggested that the girl wanted to sleep, and the second agreed with this, because it was already lunchtime. The child was outraged that he would have to sleep again. The girl was dissatisfied with the fact that she spent all day only eating, sleeping, and going to the potty. She remembered the words of the man from the spirit world, that the memories of her past life were fading more and more every day. The words that the body and mind are inseparable turned out to be unfounded. The girl understood that just a little more, and she would completely forget her past and become an ordinary child. But for now, every day was indistinguishable from the previous one, but it was for the better. Cedric came to the girl and asked a maid named Vivian whether the baby was sleeping now. The girl noticed that the boy visited her room too often. The maid replied that the little lady had just had a light snack and was now going to take a nap. Cedric heard this and was very happy. The boy asked the maids to keep it a secret from his parents that he came here, because now he should be at fencing lessons. He went up to the crib and said that he really wanted to look at Eva. The girl thought it was a little strange that he decided to skip class for something like that. Cedric at least once, and then she got down on all fours and smiled at the boy. At that very moment, she captured her brother's heart. He was touched by what he saw and told Vivian that it seemed to him that Ava smiled at him now. All three stood near the crib and looked joyfully at the child. Cedric said that there is no one in the world cuter than his tiny sister. He asked the girl to smile at least one more time. The boy went to the window and pulled back the curtain. He saw someone in the yard and then turned around and joyfully told Ava that their brother had returned. From the maids who took care of the girl, she learned a little about Arten's family. She heard a maid named Vivian say that the master and his sons wore bracelets made of thread. Margaret answered that the owner had not sparred with the knights for 9 months because he was afraid that the bracelet might break. There was a superstition among the people that if you wear a bracelet made of a very thin thread without removing it before giving birth, and make sure that it does not break, then you will definitely have a beautiful daughter. The father was looking forward to the birth of his daughter, so perhaps this is not a superstition at all. The eldest son, Arkan, went north to act as successor. The maid liked that the little lady had such a strong older brother, and the other 2 brothers were very popular with the young ladies of the capital. The girl learned that already at a young age they paid a lot of attention to discipline and their responsibilities. The maids considered them ideal candidates to be the next duke. She began to worry because she hardly managed to be born into a cozy and calm family, but it turned out that if she was part of the duke's family, she would have to put her life on the line to fulfill her duty. The girl imagined how in this family they forbid you to go somewhere until you have read 100 books. She began to think that she would like to give up some unnecessary responsibilities. That same day, everyone gathered to meet the first son of the Arten family, named Arkan von Arten, who had returned. The young man was met by the Duke and Duchess. Arkan approached his parents and bowed and then greeted them. Alicia hugged her son and said that she was very happy because he returned to them safe and sound. Arkan asked his parents if anything unusual had happened while he was away. The Duke hesitated a little and began to vaguely talk about what happened. Arkan became agitated and assumed that they were under attack again. The man clenched his fist and said that he didn't understand how their Ava could be so beautiful, and added that the girl was very similar to Arkan's mother, and when the child laughed, he was simply charming. The Duke happily talked about how the girl had recently called him daddy, although she still couldn't say the word mommy. Alicia grinned and said that Eva could not speak yet. The parents told their son, who did not understand anything, that Eva was already tired of waiting for her older brother, but he replied that first he had to tell his father about the affairs of the state, and at that moment Arkan was called. The young man turned around and saw his brother Cedric, and behind him 2 maids who were looking after the girl. The boy had something wrapped in his hands. Cedric smiled and happily noted that he and his brother had not seen each other for a long time. Arkan grinned in response and asked how his brother was doing. The boy unwrapped the package and showed Arkan his younger sister. The girl looked attentively at her older brother, but he did not express affection for Ava from the first moments. Cedric, grinning, asked his brother if he thought she was cute. Arkan smiled a little, but was still a little indifferent to the fact that his sister was very cute. The girl decided that this could no longer continue, and she would have to use her deadly technique. She begins to smile and extends her hand to her older brother, and then says the word Nia to him. Arkan looks at the girl's gesture and freezes for a few moments and cannot take his eyes off her. Cedric asks his brother if he wants to come closer to them. Arkan hesitated to answer, and his brother suggested that he needed to report to his father first, and therefore he would wait for him. The older brother could not refuse Cedric to stay with him and play with Ava. Arkan became angry and said that his report was not that important. The family gathered in the evening for dinner. Alicia held the girl in her arms, and the Duke stood behind and suggested that their daughter did not look like yesterday. Then the father leaned over to the girl and rubbed his face against her cheek. He said that today she was even more charming than yesterday. The man extended his palms to Alicia and asked to give him the girl in his arms. Cedric and Arkan were unhappy with this, because they themselves wanted to hold their younger sister. Cedric said that his father was too busy with government affairs and offered to take Ava in his arms instead of him. Arkan insisted that his brother was not even 7 years old, and there was no need to bother himself like that. The Duke was pleased that his sons were so vying for the attention of their younger sister. Alicia took a small piece of fruit with a fork and handed it to the girl. Ava did not like the fruit that her mother offered, and the girl decided to give this slice to someone else. The Duke and his sons watched her eat, but the girl held out a piece in their direction. All 3 began to argue among themselves about which of them Eva was going to treat. While her father and older brothers could not decide which of them would eat this slice, the girl decides to create even more chaos among them and throws the slice in their direction. Alicia takes the berry in her hands and offers it to the girl, and Avelia, pleased with her action, thinks that in the future her life will be just as calm. One day, the Duke put on a formal suit and came to the girl. He grinned and leaned towards her, then asked her to come with him. That day, Eva was dressed in a beautiful dress and her hair was decorated. The man joyfully took the girl in his arms and told her that they were going to the imperial palace. But the daughter did not want this. In the evening, the emperor carefully studied the papers in the moonlight. His name was Carlyle Regulus Arcadia. A maid enters the emperor's room and reports that the Duke of Artina has arrived to see him. The man tells her to invite the Duke to him. Hugo von Artina enters the emperor and greets his majesty and calls him the son of Arcadia. Carlyle Regulus asked not to use formalities because there was no one else in the room and invited the Duke to sit down. The emperor pointed to a basket of fruit and invited Hugo to treat himself to citrines brought from the kingdom of Zeos. These were fruits that tasted like a mixture of orange and lime. The Duke said that he had one request for the emperor. Carlyle took one fruit and began to eat it, and then asked what the request of a man who knew practically no worries was. Hugo asked the emperor to lend him a banquet hall, which was located in the imperial palace. Carlyle was very surprised and even asked the man if he had heard correctly, but Hugo repeated his request. The emperor wanted to know why the Duke needed the banquet hall. The emperor asked the Duke if he knew that this hall had been used for centuries only for events related to the founding of our empire or the emperor's birthdays. Every sane aristocrat in the empire knew full well that the fortunes of the empire rested on the blood of the Artin family, and so Carlyle assumed that no one would object to the Duke being given the right to use the imperial banquet hall. The emperor laughed and said that he was amused by the fact that such a straightforward person as the Duke decided to break all traditions and ask for more preferences for himself. Carlyle assumed that the eldest son, Arkin, had become engaged to someone. The Duke replied that they could hold a similar event on their own estate. Hugo told the emperor that the reason he needed the imperial banquet hall was because his daughter Eva's birthday was coming up in a month. Carlyle was surprised that the Duke wanted to use his banquet hall not for his own wedding or engagement, but for his daughter's birthday ball, and assumed that Hugo was crazy. The Duke said that he wanted to agree in advance that he would need the banquet hall again when his daughter went out for the first time. The emperor was even more stunned by this request. Hugo then took the basket of citrines and said that he would take it with him. He suggested that Eva would really like the fruit. The emperor was very shocked by the Duke's behavior and tried to argue with Hugo that these fruits were his. In the evening, the girl slept in a crib under the window. Someone covered her with a blanket, and Eva thought that this made her feel warm and cozy. A man from the spirit world stood by her bed, and an aura of water hovered around her. He suggested that the girl looked very happy, and then told Avelia to call him and he would wait for it. The girl tried to open her eyes and only saw the blurry silhouette of a man. She couldn't figure out who it was because she really wanted to sleep. Eva woke up fully in the morning and found Arcana next to her bed. The girl decided that she had a dream, and all this time her older brother was by the bed. Arkan took the girl in his arms and pressed her to him. He said that she needed to get up despite the fact that she didn't like it, because today was a special day. The brother congratulated the girl on her birthday. The young man kissed the girl on the cheek and assumed that he was the first to congratulate her on the holiday. He admitted that he got up early especially for this and ran to her. On this day, the maids festively dressed and combed Ava's hair. They wanted to know the girl's opinion about her new dress, which the Duke had specially ordered for this purpose. Avelia looked at herself in the mirror and could not believe that it was her reflection due to the fact that Vivian had done a good job tidying up the girl's appearance. From the corridor, I could hear Cedric talking about the need to put more effort into fencing. Then he and his parents entered the girl's room. They saw the girl and began to admire how amazing their baby was today. Cedric went up to Ava and took her hands and began to be touched by her. The Duke approached his daughter and extended his palm to her. He wished her a happy birthday and then assumed that he was the first to do it. The girl gestured to the Duke that he was not the first. The man was a little upset, but said that he had prepared the best gift for her. The father took Ava in his arms and lifted her up. He happily announced that they were going to the imperial palace. The girl didn't like so much attention, because she just wanted a quiet and peaceful life. There was a new carriage in the yard. Alicia noticed that the Duke ordered it for this occasion. The man explained that he had to use magic to prevent shaking and scare away insects. At the ball, the guests were already discussing that the young lady was charming and looked like her mother, and her thin golden hair was like rays of the sun, and in this she was just like her father. Some of those present expressed their dissatisfaction with the fact that the emperor's banquet hall was being used, even if only for the birthday party of the duke's daughter. There was a specially decorated place in the hall for the girl. The guests were amazed by this, because it seemed to be prepared for His Majesty the Emperor. One of the attendants announced to the whole hall that everyone should greet the Duke and Duchess and their sons, as well as the young Madame Artina. Arten's family entered the hall. The first were Hugo Artina and his wife, followed by their sons. Arkin carried little Avelia in his arms. Everyone in the hall froze and looked at the Arten family. After some time, the employee announced that His Majesty the Emperor had arrived at the ball, and all attention fell on him. Carlyle Regulus asked to stop paying so much attention to his person and said that he was just stopping by and passing to congratulate the daughter of his only friend on her birthday. Then the Emperor turned around and winked at the Duke. Carlyle Regulus turned to the Duke of Artina and asked why he was not saying anything, because it was Hugo who was the organizer of the ball. The Emperor sat down in a beautifully decorated chair, and the Duke said that he first wanted to thank the son of our empire for illuminating their holiday with his presence. Hugo von Artina looked at those present and sincerely expressed gratitude to all those who came to congratulate Avelia on her birthday today. The Duke said that his daughter would light the path that his family would follow. He stood behind the girl and stated that he hoped that none of those present would ever stand in the way of the Arten family. The Duke's words pleased the Emperor. He laughed and noticed that the Duke had a unique character. One of the guests told the Duke that it was a great honor for him to be present at this celebration. The man said that he managed to get the bracelet while traveling around the Harvant Empire. Hugo listened to the man very warily. The guest said that his bracelet could not be compared with anything that the Duke could see before, and added that this tiara contained magical power. Another one of those present turned to the Duke and said that the hero of this occasion was truly beautiful. The man admired how much the girl looked like her mother Elysia. Hugo thanked the guest for such a compliment and suggested that the man was Count Czerny. Everyone present admired the girl. The guests discussed that if the Duke's daughter changed her hair color, she would look like a duchess. The girl was bored, and she didn't understand why there were so many compliments. Among the guests was a marquis named Lucius de Font. The man greeted the Duke and noted that he had not seen him for a long time, and then congratulated Hugo on his daughter's birthday. The girl saw the marquis and immediately realized that he was unpleasant to her. Lucius de Font looked at the girl and said that her eyes were amazing. The Marquis then bowed and asked forgiveness for not personally visiting the Duke at the estate and congratulating him. Hugo reassured Lucius and said that they had not been receiving guests lately. The Marquis said that he had heard that the Duke was visited by the Marquis of Cassis, but the rumors should not be trusted. Duke Artina replied that he meant that they did not receive uninvited guests. The girl was very unhappy with the atmosphere that was developing. Cedric extended his hands to Avelia and offered to take a little walk. The boy carried his sister to another place where they could sit down. Arkin joined them and began offering the girl treats. Cedric wiped Avelia's mouth with a napkin and asked his older brother why his father behaved this way. Arkin replied that Her Majesty the Empress passed away a year ago. The current crown prince was the next contender for the imperial throne. This happened a year ago after Empress Loana died of illness. From then on, all power in the palace passed into the hands of the emperor's concubine Beneke. In the highest circles there appeared those who wanted to place Prince Edwin on the throne, bypassing the direct heir. The crown prince retained his right to the throne, and it was clear that he was a born emperor. But the fact that he did not have proper maternal relatives could be fatal for him. The Marquis of de Font is using the situation to get closer to the crown prince, and if the crown prince ascends the throne, the Marquis may be in favor, and it is possible that he will be able to take the place of the Duke. At that moment the girl was eating treats and listening to the brothers' conversation. Now it was clear why Marquis Lucius and his father had such a tense relationship. At one moment, everything around became dim and filled with bright light. The girl could not understand what was happening, because she assumed that her vision could not deteriorate at such a young age. The space around the girl began to fill with the aura of water, and small spirits that looked like fish appeared. One of these fish landed on the girl's head, and Avelia was very scared. A small water spirit flew up to the girl's face and addressed Avelia. He called her a person with the mark of the Lord, and said that she was the only creature who received his blessing. Evelia pointed to herself and clarified whether the spirit meant her specifically. He confirmed that he was talking about her and added that she was the first person who understood spirits, although she did not enter into a contract. The spirit explained that the girl's energy was as pure as the Lord's. He said that he feels a refreshing feeling next to Evelia, and it is very pleasant for him to be near her. The girl asked who the ruler was. The spirit explained that they all appeared thanks to him, and now they are called upon to protect him, and added that the ruler was the ruler of all the waters of this world. The spirits invited Evelia to make a deal. They explained that they had been waiting all this time for her young body to mature enough to handle the terms of the deal, and now they would protect her. The girl grinned because such fish would protect her. Evelia assumed that it was she who should protect them, so that someone would not accidentally pick them up with a fishing rod. Evelia said that she would protect the spirits, and from now on, they would be her friends. The creatures noticed that she was truly a difficult person to offer friendship with them. The spirits asked the girl to repeat after them, but Evelia replied that she did not yet know how to talk, and the creatures said that it was enough for her to just think. They uttered a phrase that said that the spirits asked to become her companions, and in return she offered them her soul. The girl repeated this, and everything around was filled with bright light. The creatures told her that the very foundation of the water was filled with her spirit, and vowed to become a sword and shield for the girl on her path. When the spirits left the girl, everything around returned to its place. The girl thought that there would be a lot of noise if someone found out about her agreement with the spirits and decided to keep it a secret. Those present fell silent and began to look at the girl, but she did not understand the reason for this behavior. Everyone looked at the symbol that appeared on Evelia's forehead. The spiritual magicians had a seal on their foreheads that could only be discerned by the spirits themselves, especially during the first transaction, in which a person's connection with spirits was imprinted on his soul. For about 10 minutes, the mark on the forehead lit up with a blinding flash of light. This was the only time people could see the seal. This was enough to understand the nature of spirits. So it was said in the Heron Publishing House on page 605. Everyone, without exception, looked at the girl and whispered among themselves that this could not have happened, and were very stunned by what they saw. Tears began to appear in the girl's eyes, and she thought that she had done something wrong. The older brothers began to shield Evelia from the curious public. Cedric ordered those present not to look, and then even declared that the guests dared to look at his sister disrespectfully. Arkan leaned towards his younger sister in order to better examine the symbol on her forehead. The young man suggested that it was a spirit seal. The guests could not believe that the mark of water appeared on the Duke's daughter's forehead because she had just turned 1 year old. The Emperor ordered everyone present to stop making noise. He said that it could not be said with certainty that the pattern on the forehead of the Duke's daughter was the mark of the spirits. Carlyle stated that the girl was not able to make a pact with the spirits because she was only 1 year old. He added that more significant events than this had never happened in the Arton family until now. The Emperor explained to everyone present that in this way the spirits blessed their glorious empire. Arkan told his brother that he would take Evelia for a while. The girl was very frightened and thought that the Emperor was not himself. The Duke approached the Emperor and suggested that he calm down a little. Carlyle responded sharply to Hugo's suggestion that the man was not calm. The Emperor said that there were rumors all over the world that their empire had lost the protection of spirits, and the former glory of the state was a thing of the past. The girl thought that the Emperor was the master of her father, and if this was so, then it was the bread of their family, and food was the most important thing in this world. Carlyle approached the girl and bent down to take her in his arms. The Duke was very excited about what the Emperor intended to do. Evelia grabs the Emperor's jacket with her small hands, and this causes great surprise among those around him. The girl decides that she cannot let go of her bread just like that and intends to conquer the Emperor with her cute appearance. Evelia begins to smile and tries to talk to the man. Happy Carlyle takes the child in his arms. He happily announces that the girl recognized her dad's friend. The man quietly thanks Evelia for this. The Emperor says he hopes she will take care of their crown prince in the future. The girl is surprised and does not understand why he asks her for this. Marquis Lucius Default enviously bites his lip looking at this. Evelia made several short sounds to the Emperor, and the man understood this as agreement to his request and thanked her. Carlyle told everyone present that after so many years of waiting, a spiritual magician had finally been born in their country, and now it was imperative to notify all the inhabitants of the empire about this. The emperor ordered a 3-day festival to be held in the capital from today in honor of the birth of a new spiritual magician. Alicia walked to the window and looked out of it. She noticed that the festival that the emperor had organized was still going on. The duke came up and stood behind his wife. He said that the scars of the first demon war had still not healed. The man said that even a child knew that the complete opposite of a demon was a spirit. However, he had doubts about whether the very existence of a magician was directly related to the security of the country. Alicia asked her husband if Marquis Lucius had done something again. The Duke replied that the Marquis did not pose any threat, and now he would probably not have his head blown off. The man admitted that he was worried about whether they would be able to protect Evelia. The wife said that she was also worried about this. Evelia's abilities manifested themselves right in front of all the nobility in the banquet hall. Because of this, the Duke was worried that many people would now try to get closer to their family. Hugo believed that their daughter was not only charming, but also possessed outstanding abilities. The man admitted that it was necessary to tear out the eyes of the capital's goldfinches. Alicia excitedly asked to explain what the Duke meant. The husband replied that it would be necessary to assign knights to the girl as guards. Hugo believed that the girl would be safer with security until this brainless rabble did something to their daughter. The woman looked at the sleeping child. Alicia began to talk about who in their right mind would dare to threaten the safety of their girl, but agreed that assigning a knight was a good idea. They decided that they would have to call some people to the capital who were not very pleasant to them, but this was in order to protect the girl. Arten's knights walked through the forest and exterminated monsters. One of the warriors named Harold discusses rumors with a comrade named Twain that knights are being selected to protect their little mistress. Twain replied to the herald that he refused this because he did not see any fun in it if there were no demons and runaways from the kingdom at the service. Harold says he gave it up too. Knight Alec says that he heard that the young lady is very similar to her mother. The other knights thought for a moment about what he said. Alec invites the other knights to buy their mistress some kind of gift. He takes the monster's head in his hand and says that if you dry it well, you can use it as a decoration. Situated under a tree, one of the knights is dozing under the rays of the sun. He thinks about what kind of person their young mistress is. It's no secret that even among the knights in the service of the emperor himself, the knights of Artan have no equal. Instead of sitting quietly in the capital, enjoying all the benefits and riches, they personally went to fight demons in the northern regions, but this is not what they became famous for. 2 years have already passed since the Duke of Artina drove them away to the north, since their mere presence could already cause a lot of trouble for those around them. The knights' favorite pastime was destroying the remnants of the old kingdom. However, their main passion was hunting higher demons. There were no other such desperate people in the entire north. A man named Hadel addressed the knights and expressed gratitude to them on behalf of the Duke for their faithful service. The knights joyfully greeted Hadel after they had not seen each other for several years. Twain suggested that the man had freshened up a bit over the years. The men jokingly began to assume that Hadel had a girlfriend and joke about it, but he denied their guesses. The knights said that Hadel had dull eyes because his girlfriend left him. The man ignored their ridicule and mentally asked God for strength to withstand these jokes. About 10 years had passed since he was made the butler of the Arten family from an ordinary servant, and now that he had met the knights he knew, he was worried that everything would spoil because of them. The knights began to joke that today they were having a barbecue for dinner from a colt they had seen nearby. One of the knights suggested that the Duchess herself was looking after the foal, and his comrade offered to bring the animal. Hadel tried to stop them, but it was all in vain. Suddenly, Twain stopped and said that he heard someone quietly address Hegel. He turned around and was very surprised at what he saw. Behind him stood a little girl in a pink dress and holding a basket of fruit in her hands. She asked the knights who they were. All 3 comrades turned around and looked at the girl in surprise. They were stunned to see her. Hadel approached the girl and invited her to meet the knights of Arten. The man explained that they had sworn an oath of allegiance to her father and were now serving under him. Knight Twain stepped forward and introduced himself. The man said that he intended to become the girl's bodyguard. Evelia, because of her age, was still confused in her words and called him a bodyguard. The herald pushed him away and declared that he would become her personal bodyguard, and added that he was a master at reading fairy tales. Alec tried to offer the girl an orc's head, but the other knights tried to stop him. Alec's comrades blamed him for saying stupid things in front of his mistress, and he tried to justify himself. Evelia watched with interest as they argued. The girl thought that it was very noisy here, but also very fun at the same time. She took one berry from the basket, and handing it to the knight, said that it was a gift. The man took the berry and began to examine it. He was very surprised by the girl's act and could not answer anything. The other knights cheerfully stated that they did not want to return to the north, and they no longer needed either the demons or the soldiers of the kingdom. Evelia grinned happily and greeted the knight. At that moment, she seemed to the knights to be a very sweet girl. The Duke approached them and noticed that the knights had already arrived, and then announced to them that they had served well. The knights lined up in front of Hugo and reported their return, and then greeted his lordship. Suddenly, someone in a quiet, childish voice repeated the words of the knights, slightly changing the letters in the words. The men were surprised and looked at the Duke. They thought Hugo had just said that. The girl put the basket aside and stood in a knight's stance. She said that she was reporting her arrival to his lordship. Evelia was still a child, and therefore some of the letters were confused in what she was saying. The knights immediately all turned and looked at the girl. They really liked what she just said and asked her to repeat it. One of the knights told them to stop this in the presence of the Duke. Hugo thought that his daughter was very cute. The girl approached the Duke and hugged him tightly. Hadel held the girl's basket and imagined what could happen next, because only one person was required to act as a permanent bodyguard. A month later, the knights were training at the training ground. Evelia came to them with a large purse and called the knights. She said there was a break in their training. One of the men knelt in front of the girl and asked why she came to them. The girl smiled back and said that she did it just like that. Evelia opened her adventure bag and showed the knights candy and fruit. The men said it looked more like the knights were having a picnic than an adventure. The older brother approached the girl and said that she couldn't go on a trip alone and offered to accompany his younger sister. Evelia was very happy and agreed to his proposal, and then invited everyone to eat together. Arkan hugged his sister, and the knights said that they agreed to have lunch with her and were even ready to go catch the Demon King. Alec invited the girl to listen to the knights' stories about their adventures, and she happily agreed to this. The Duke saw how the knights surrounded the girl with their attention instead of training, and said that they needed to know the limits in this, and invited them to return to the training ground. The men looked at him in surprise, and in order to justify their attention to the girl, one of them said that Evelia was almost knocked off by a leaf from a tree. The knights began to pretend to the Duke that they were protecting her, and the girl looked around in surprise to understand what they meant. Hugo looked at his beautiful daughter and thought about which knight was worthy to become her bodyguard. Evelia told her father that she already knew who would protect her. She turned around and began to look for the knight she liked among the others. The girl approached one of the men and extended her hands to him, and then said that she chose him as her bodyguard. The rest of the knights stood nearby and were very upset that Evelia did not choose them, because everyone wanted to guard the girl. In the evening, the Duke called the knight to his place and told him that the young man was still too young for such work, and the knight was a little upset about this. Hugo then added that on the other hand, this meant that he had room to grow in the future, and asked the knight to take care of Evelia. In the distant past, when the young man was not yet a knight, one evening, all wounded, he ran away from his enemies. The boy was in a hurry and accidentally tripped and fell to the ground, and at that time, they had almost caught up with him. 3 men stood behind him. One of them mocked the boy's attempts to escape from them. The man said that killing a child was not the most pleasant thing. The killer said that the order was just an order to him, and reminded the boy that they were already kind to him, and then swung his sword to kill the young man. At that moment, as if out of nowhere, the Duke appeared and protected the boy from the enemies, killing them. The man invited him to go with him, and he, in turn, would give the boy a chance. At that moment it was a ray of light in the pitch darkness that brought the young man out of poverty and made him a respected knight. Instead of becoming a simple hired killer, the young man set out to destroy those who posed a threat to their empire. From then on, the Duke of Artina was like a light and a god for him. The young man lowered his head and swore to the Duke that from that moment on, his blade and soul belonged entirely to his mistress. In the morning, Evelia, as usual, slept quietly in her crib, tightly hugging a large teddy bear. Her brother came to her room and began to wake up the girl. He touched her cheek with his finger and said that the sun was already high. The girl woke up and waved her brother's hand away. She objected to him that it was still morning and she wanted to sleep. The boy grinned in response and said that only small children could lie in bed for so long, and yet she herself had recently insisted that she be treated like an adult. The brother reminded Avelia how she told the knight that she was already an adult and asked him to teach her how to fight with swords. The girl answered her brother that she had already changed her mind about growing up and asked Cedric to take her in his arms. The boy smiled and leaned towards her. Arkan saw his brother carrying the girl and said that someone had recently declared that he was already an adult. The older brother wanted to know why Avelia was in Cedric's arms. The girl was indignant and said that in the morning she was little and in the evening she was an adult, and since it was now morning, now Eva was a child. Cedric sat his indignant little sister at the dinner table and said that Avelia was still a child. The girl saw an envelope in her plate. She took it in her hands and began to examine it. She was very interested to know what it was. Satisfied brothers stood nearby and smiled. Cedric made a surprised face and said that everyone was very curious about what it could be. Avelia opened the envelope and found inside it a beautifully decorated invitation addressed to Avelia von Artina. The herald was walking through the palace when suddenly they greeted him. The knight was a little scared and then turned around and saw the girl. The man immediately took the girl in his arms and lifted her up. Avelia was holding in her hands the invitation that she discovered at breakfast this morning. The girl thrust the invitation into the knight's face. The herald read it and realized that it was an invitation letter from the Marquis of Cassis. Since ancient times, the Cassis family was famous for many outstanding wizards. The present Marquis of Cassis was a close comrade in arms of His Majesty, the Emperor and Duke of Artan. They went through many difficulties together. The girl looked at the upset herald. The knight asked her about who he would play with if she went to the marquee. Avelia showed Harold her index finger and stated that he was already an adult and could long ago play games on his own. The girl asked him about when he would grow up. The knight was in despair and could not believe that a 3-year-old girl the size of a tea mug was asking him about when he would grow up. A few days later, a carriage arrived at their palace. Avelia and her family were ready to go to the Marquis of Cassis. The Duke helped his wife settle into the carriage. Alicia turned around and told the girl that it was time for them to leave, but Avelia still could not say goodbye to Gerald. The girl was holding a teddy bear in her hands and was very moved by the departure and reassured the excited knight that she would return soon. The herald asked Avelia to repeat what they had recently taught her. The girl agreed and cheerfully replied that she remembered all this. The knights asked the girl to explain to them what to do if a demon appeared on the road. Avelia growled menacingly and said that it was necessary to frighten the demon. The way the girl answered the question really touched the knights. The men were amazed to the point of tears at how she remembered their advice. The herald gave a thumbs up and said that it was very cute, but after a moment he corrected himself and added that the girl's display was very threatening. The knights thought that the demons would not attack the girl after all. Then the herald asked what it was necessary to respond to a stranger who offered to eat together. The girl resolutely replied that she would not take food from strangers, and if someone patted her on the head, she would simply hit him. The herald praised the girl for her answer, although he thought that Avelia's legs were a little short in order to reach the most important places. Finally, the knight asked the girl what she would do if someone dragged her somewhere. The girl loudly answered him that in that case she would scream. Avelia showed how she would call the knights for help while the Duke was watching her at that time. He told the knights that they had not wasted their time with the girl. Alicia mentally praised the Duke. She wanted someone to finally tell the knights to stop constantly teaching the girl all sorts of stupid things. The Duke told the knights that they had finally done something worthwhile and released them from today's training as a reward. Hugo took the girl in his arms, and his wife thought that he was becoming a total fool when it came to his daughter. The knights really wanted to go with the mistress, and everyone rushed to the door of the carriage to see the girl off, but they only took Karen and Eden. One day a girl noticed a tattered toy bunny on the street and told her father about it. The Duke immediately ordered the servants to go in search of the same toy and buy it for Avelia. The girl was a little surprised because she just wanted to show the large size of the hair. Hugo decided to give Avelia a gift in the form of a large toy bear, which was to become her friend. Since then, he became the girl's only friend, and she began to sleep with him. Evelia played with him constantly, and this teddy bear was a jack of all trades for her. This bear was not the only one and complemented the existing forest of toys that Evelia already had by that time. The girl was riding in a carriage and hugging a toy bear that she took with her on the trip. Evelia asked Cedric if she could find many friends where they were going. The boy thought a little and said that in addition to them, the Marquis of Cassis would have children from other families, and suggested that the girl could make friends with them. The girl was very happy about what her older brother said and hugged her soft toy even more. Hugo Artina was the only duke of the empire whose fame was as great as it was heavy. Many became close to him for profit, but there were also those who entered into open hostility with him. In such a situation, it was very difficult to find a true friend. Evelia wanted to make many friends, but the duke hoped that his girl would not suffer, and the truth about this world would not cause her much pain. Upon arrival, they were joyfully greeted by a man in a suit. He noticed that he no longer remembered the last time Artin's family visited him. The Duke admitted that he held back and did not arrive until his friend himself showed up at Hugo's office, which was located in the Imperial Palace, and he began to tearfully beg him to come. The man replied that he actually wanted to see the Duke's daughter more than he did. The Marquis said that even if he had come to visit Hugo, the Duke would probably have hidden the girl from him. Evelia was very surprised by what the Marquis said about her. The girl curtsied to the Marquis of Cassis and wished his family magical prosperity, and then introduced herself. The man affably noted that the little princess had already grown significantly during the time they had not seen each other. The Marquis introduced his son and daughter to the guests. The boy was neatly dressed and looked like his father, and his younger sister was hiding behind him. The Marquis's son greeted the guests and said that he was glad to meet them. The boy's name was Icrian Cassis. Icrian walked up to Evelia and took her hand. He thanked the little lady from the bottom of his heart for visiting them. The girl thought that her brothers were jealously looking at Icrian, and she had the feeling that because of one wrong move, bloodshed could begin. Earlier, when they were still traveling to the Marquess's estate, his brother recommended to Evelia that she should not get close to Icrian, who was the heir to the Cassis family. The boy told her that Icrian was a big bully who would not spare even a cute lamb. The girl looked at Icrian and found confirmation of her brother's words. The Marquis's son looked like a very smooth-talking fox. After this, the Marquis asked his daughter Lillian to say hello to Evelia. The girl was very shy, but curtsied and greeted the guest. Lillian approached Evelia and said that she hoped that they could become friends together. Marquis Cassis explained that Lillian was weak and had no friends at all. His daughter would be incredibly happy if Evelia became her friend. Lillian looked at the girl and thought that Evelia was the daughter of a duke from the noble Artin family, and she may well not like such a weak and cowardly girl like her. Evelia took the girl's hand and looked into her eyes, and then invited Lillian to become friends if the girl was not against it. Sometimes you don't need any reason to become true friends. In the future, girls will often remember the moment when their eyes first met. This was the moment when they felt that they would become friends forever. In the house, the boys sat on the sofas opposite each other, and the girls spread out on the floor around a small table with treats. Lillian treated Evelia with sweets. At some point, she asked Eva if the lady would like to try some more goodies. Evelia showed her index finger to her friend and asked her to simply call her Eva. Lillian replied that she would not dare to afford such a thing, and said that the girl's proposal was very sweet. Icrian looked at how the girls interacted and noticed that now it became clear to him who the Evelia brothers were proud of all day long. Evelia had charming golden hair and ocean-colored eyes, and the girl was also a favorite of the spirits. No matter how you looked at it, it was immediately clear that the girl was strikingly different from Lillian. Icrian admired little Evelia and equated her with the stars. The boy said that Eva was a little star. Archon told Icrian not to even dream about his sister if he did not want Archon and his brother to help him go to the next world. The boy winked back and said that he was attracted to older girls. Icrian explained that, in his opinion, a mature lady was much better than an unintelligent child. Archon folded his hands on his chest and, with an important look, warned the Marquis's son not to think anything bad. Icrian said that he felt sorry for the poor guy that Evelia would love because he would have to deal with her brothers, who were a real headache. Cedric jumped up and declared that they would never allow their sister to have a lover ever. Icrian thought that the life of Evelia's lover would hang by a thread every second. One of the employees of the Marquis of Cassis suggested that we go to a picnic that was arranged in their wonderful garden. The children of the Marquis and Avelia and their brothers went on a picnic. Cedric led his little sister by the hand, and she tried to catch a beautiful blue butterfly. There were many small children in the garden who were playing various games, and there was children's laughter and exclamations all around. There were a boy and a girl who had a fight over something and were crying loudly. Among the children, one could notice two girls in beautiful dresses. One of them had already soiled her dress and was trying to spill a red drink on the other girl. Archon and Ikrian looked at how the children spent their time and thought that if hell exists, then this is what it looks like. Ikrian suggested that Archon go and practice fencing. Cedric raised his hand and exclaimed that he also wanted to spar, because fencing was a very important activity. All three wanted to quickly get away from what the children were doing here. The boys looked at their younger sisters and began to consult about what to do with Lillian and Avelia, and then one of Eva's brothers offered to take the girls with them to play next to them. Avelia thought for a moment, and then put her thumb and forefinger forward, declaring that she wanted to stay here. She felt that this could be interesting. Lillian also did not want to go with the boys, and she resolutely exclaimed that she would also stay in the garden and play with Avelia. Ikrian was very surprised by this behavior of his younger sister, because before she had never left his side, but now she so easily and gladly agreed to go with another girl. The Marquis' son explained to the girls that if someone offended them, they should immediately call their older brothers for help. Avelia replied that she could stand up for herself, because the knights taught her how to behave in dangerous situations. Archon and Cedric asked the girl not to take the situation to extremes, and simply call the boys for help in case of danger. Avelia agreed to his proposal. The girls came closer to the other children, and everyone began to look at them. One of the kids noticed that one of the girls was the daughter of Duke Arton. The children admired how beautiful Avelia was. They were discussing among themselves how someone's dad had spoken earlier about the incredible beauty of the girl, but they had no idea that she was so pretty. The girlfriends went forward to the children. Avelia proudly walked towards adventure, but the daughter of the Marquis was very worried about so much attention. Lillian imagined that the other children were just pebbles to calm herself down a little. Avelia sat down on one of the benches in the garden, and almost immediately a girl in a blue dress approached her and introduced herself. This was the daughter of Count Karen, named Morrigan Karen. Before Eva had time to greet the girl in return, other children immediately began to come up and introduce themselves. One of them invited the girl to come and visit them for tea. The girl was very alarmed by so much attention and thought that it was time to fight back to the death. Among the children was a girl in a red dress who approached Avelia and introduced herself and then turned away from her. The girl's name was Ceres, and she was the daughter of the Marquis of Defont. Avelia, a little perplexed, replied that she was glad to meet you and introduced herself to the girl, saying her name. Ceres asked Ava if she had been taught that showing up to a party and causing such a commotion was not a sign of good manners. Avelia didn't understand why she was talking about this. The daughter of the Marquis of Defonta suggested that Avelia had not yet fully understood the rules of etiquette, but there was no need to worry about it, because Ceres offered to help her with this. She explained that when several people greet someone at the same time, they need to stand up and politely receive them. Ceres admitted that Avelia still did not know a lot, but explained that she should not be ashamed of this, because the Duke's daughter was still so young. Eva, and she began to remember where she had heard it before. Avelia realized that this was the daughter of that same slippery Marquis of Defont. The girl thought that Ceres was the spitting image of her father, although at first Eve thought that she was her savior. The Duke's daughter did not like the way the girl treated her and was hostile towards Ceres, even though she looked nice. Ceres looked at Ava and thought that the girl was even dumber than she initially thought. She wondered why the Duke's daughter did not react to her words. Before Avelia's birth, the Artons all considered Ceres the first beauty in the country and the future queen of social circles, and she was also the closest friend of the next empress. About 2 years ago, Ceres lost everything on the day Avelia celebrated her first birthday, and the whole country learned about her. Ceres looked at the Duke's daughter and thought that she didn't have enough stars in the sky, and she didn't see anything special in her. The Marquis's daughter secretly heard from her father that soon the Arton family would collapse, and when this happened, Ceres would push Avelia around like a slave. Ceres noticed that Arton's knights had returned to the capital, and it was rumored that they had fled from the front in fear, afraid of demonic spawn. Evelia looked at the girl indignantly, and Ceres was pleased that the Duke's daughter finally showed at least some reaction. The girl said that Ceres does not dare insult her knights. Eva began to move her hands, and an aura of water magic began to appear around her. The children who stood nearby were very alarmed. Evelia ordered the spirit of water, whose name was Ondine, to appear, and he immediately appeared before them. The spirit doused Ceres with water, and she stood completely wet. She indignantly demanded that Evelia explain her action. The Duke's daughter was proud of her action and thought that she was not going to tolerate insults against her knights, and therefore gave a small surprise to Ceres. Suddenly, someone called Evelia and asked the girl to explain what she had allowed herself to do. Both girls became alert and turned around to see who it was. An aura of dark magic began to appear around them, and as if a huge roaring creature appeared from underground. The children began to run away in different directions in horror. One of the boys exclaimed that Dantalion himself had come to them. Demons were mainly divided into two categories. The first category included ordinary demons, and the second included 72 Lemagetan demons, which possessed exceptional power. Ordinary demons were completely and unquestioningly loyal to them, but the Dantalions did not obey the 72 demons, and for this they received the mark of apostates. The Dantalions were completely driven out of the demonic lands. As a result, they had to survive by eating scraps that fell from the farthest corners of the underworld. These demons had no self-awareness and no fear. The only thing that motivated the Dantalions was the desire to tear to pieces everything that came their way. Suddenly, one of the children pushes Evelia from behind with his hand, and she, unable to resist, falls to the ground. Lillian was very scared for her friend and rushed to her. The girl immediately inquired about Eva's well-being. The Duke's daughter turned around and saw that she had been pushed by some unfamiliar girl in a green dress. The stranger was at one with Ceres. After Evelia fell, they stood nearby and laughed about it. Evelia tried to get up and called Ondine to her. The girl understood that the spirit of water was her friend and did not want the Dantalion to eat Ondine. The demon began to approach the girl. He growled menacingly and then extended his hand forward, and flames began to appear from his palm. Down the girl's cheeks, but she was not afraid, but on the contrary, rushed to attack the demon. She grabbed him by the hair with a scream and began to call her dad, mom, and brothers for help. The girl herself did not understand how she tore out a tuft of fur from the demon. Evelia thought about whether she had forgotten to call someone and remembered the knights, and then loudly began to call for their help. To Evelia's aid, Arkan rushed over with a sword in his hands and asked the girl if she was wounded. The Duke's daughter sat on the grass and cried. She was very glad that her older brother arrived in time to protect her. Icrian and Cedric hurried to help the girls. Lillian and Evelia were standing next to each other at that moment. When Icrian ran up to Lillian to calm her down, he discovered that the girl was holding a small stick in her hands to fight off the demon. Cedric hugged Eva and tried to calm her down, and Icrian shielded his younger sister from the demon. Arkan ordered the boys to immediately take Evelia to a safe place. The Marquise's son ran forward and told Arkan to stop pretending to be a hero. At this time, particles of magical aura similar to pieces of ice began to appear in Icrian's hands. Every moment there were more and more Dantalions, and there were already about a dozen. Everyone was worried about what they should do in this situation, because standing even against two demons was already a feat. Artina came to the boy's aid. The man saw the demons and asked the children to explain to him what was happening here. Other adults arrived in response to the children's screams. Everyone was horrified and could not understand what the Dantalions were doing here. The Duke looked at Cedric and Eva. The boy hugged his sister tightly, who was very scared and crying. The man found an abrasion on the girl's leg. Hugo was furious that someone dared to offend his beautiful daughter. The man pulled out his sword and intended to destroy all the demons. Suddenly, knights intervened in the battle with the demons and began to climb over the fence to get into the garden of the Marquis of Cassis. The knights threw soft toys at the Dantalions, and this confused the Duke. They were eager to fight, and even as they approached, they each chose their own target. The Duke and the boys looked at this absurd situation and thought that now was not the time for demons to be encountered here among modern civilized society. The knights shouted to the Duke that there was no need for him to draw his sword. They asked Hugo to entrust them with dealing with the demons. Hugo Artina covered his face with his hand and tried to understand how the knights got here and what they were doing here. After the girl left, the knights were very upset that they were not taken with them. They were worried that something bad might happen to her in the harsh outside world. Hadel told the knights that before leaving, the lady said that she would like to take a stuffed bunny with her. The men were very inspired by this and said that they should go to a toy store and buy everything there. The herald doubted the correctness of this idea and said that the Duke forbade them to follow him to the Marquis's estate. The knights assumed that if they approached the fence of the Marquis's estate, this would not be considered a violation of the order. The herald said that he saw this fence a few days ago, and the garden in which the lady would be was adjacent to it on the left side. Having bought many soft toys for the girl, the knights went to the estate of the Marquis of Cassis in search of Avelia. At the gates of the estate, the men met a maid who went with the Artin family. The girl recognized the knights and asked them what they were doing here. Avelia's cry for help was heard, and the knights did not have time to explain the reason for their appearance. They were a little wary and rushed to save the girl. The herald grabbed one of the demons and began to beat him with his fists. He blamed Dantalion for the fact that it was his fault that the lady fell. Avelia hugged Cedric and thought that she fell not because of the demon, but because another girl pushed her. The knights quickly dispatched the demons, and the herald told the Dantalions that they were to blame for Avelia tripping and now crying. He began to blame the demons for coming here to eat. The Duke was ashamed of the behavior of his charges. He blamed himself for believing that they would sit idly by. The guests who were present at the Marquise's that day were pleasantly surprised that the knights famously handled a dozen Dantalions. The girl was still crying a lot. She was scared because these were not the knights she had known before. A knight named Karen took a toy bunny and approached the girl. He sat down next to her and handed the toy to Avelia. The girl accepted the gift and stopped crying, and then went up to Karen and hugged him, and he hugged her back. The other knights looked with envy as their little mistress hugged Karen. The herald mentally blamed the man for the fact that he was the one who bought the toy bunny. The Duke wanted to know who summoned the demons. He believed that they were deliberately called to the children's garden, and besides, today was their first time having a picnic in the fresh air, which means their goal was Avelia. Icrian approached the girl and told her to call Ondine, who could find the one who called the Dantalions. Avelia called the spirit for help, but when Ondine appeared, she pulled her cheek and accused her of calling her too loudly. The water spirit said that he had found the one who called demons into their garden. Ondine pointed to one of the men who was among the guests, and this excited him very much. The man began to justify himself by saying that he could not do this because he regularly went to church and had not yet missed a day. He asked to call the priests and ask them about this. The Duke thought that according to the laws of their country, a person who made a deal with demons had to be dealt with immediately on the spot. He was choosing between dealing with him here or sending the man to the emperor. The Duke thought that it would be nice to visit an old friend, and then ordered Count Malone to be detained. Lillian turned to the Duke and wanted to tell him something before he made his decision. The girl said that when the Dantalions appeared, Avelia tried to step back. The daughter of the Marquis explained that the daughter of Count Malone pushed Avelia back towards the demons. The girl began to make excuses and stated that Mrs. Artina simply tripped when she got up from the bench. Malone's daughter of lying. The spirit of water stated that it was this girl who pushed Avelia. The Count and his daughter were extremely frightened that they were blamed for what happened. The Duke was sure that Count Malone had summoned demons, and his daughter pushed Avelia towards the demons. The day before, Marquis Lucius de Fonte and Count Malone had communicated, and the Marquis asked the Count to deal with the daughter of the Artina family. Lucius de Fonte explained that after he gained power and Ceres became empress, the Count would be given the title of Marquis. The Count was very excited by this proposal. Marquis Lucius reassured the man and promised that he could cover him if something did not go according to plan. Avelia and the other children with him, with the exception of the young Mrs. de Fonte and Mrs. Malone, and take them from here. The elder brother extended his hands to the girl and asked her to quickly leave with him. Avelia was scared and assumed that her father was furious. Arkan hugged his younger sister tightly and tried to calm her down. He told Eva that the demons almost got her and just a little more, and they would never have seen the girl again. The elder brother told Avelia that if the father does not punish those who offended the girl, then he himself will personally deal with them. If the Duke had dealt with the Count and his daughter right here and now, then there would not have been at least one person in the country who would have dared to condemn him. After Arkan took Evelia and the other children away, the Duke ordered the knights to destroy Count Malone and his daughter. Hugo Arton found the Marquis of Defont among the guests and put his sword to his throat. The Duke told Lucius that he had failed to hide his intentions. The Marquis of Defont began to pretend that he did not understand what the Duke meant. The man asked Hugo to explain to him the reason for this behavior and offered to remove his sword for this. The Duke approached the Marquis and menacingly advised him to keep his eyes open. The man said that the laws of the Empire did not allow him to execute the Marquis now, but life is not always subject to laws. Lucius Defont believed that the Duke had no evidence that he was behind the attempt to kill his daughter. The man told Hugo that he would not dare kill him. After some time, the Marquis of Cassis took the blame before the Duke for the fact that he could not look after the guests, and therefore Hugo's daughter suffered. The Marquis begged the Duke to forgive him, but Hugo Artina replied that something like this was bound to happen someday. Evelia's birthday? Everyone saw how her magical abilities manifested themselves. Hugo looked at his daughter, who slept in the same crib with Lillian, and said that such a thing should never hurt the souls of children. The next day in the garden of the Marquis of Cassis, his daughter Lillian called Evelia to come with her. Ava asked her friend to quickly come to her. The girl pointed to the side and said that she saw a hare there. The knights hid behind in the bushes and watched the girls play. The herald leaned out of the thicket and suggested to Evelia that they could catch a hare for her if she so desired. Evelia replied that she did not want men to catch her hare and told them to stand aside and watch. Then the girl turned sharply and rushed in the direction where she had shown her friend. Evelia stated that she ran to look for the hare herself. Ava made her way through the trees and bushes in search of the animal and noticed a shiny object nearby. The girl thought it was an emerald and wanted to get it for herself. After Evelia made her way through the bushes, she finally managed to grab the shiny object. This item turned out to be an unknown man's earring, which was decorated with jewelry. The man exclaimed a little when the girl suddenly pulled his earring. He called Evelia a pot-bellied little thing and demanded to know why she did that. The stranger began to ask the girl how she found him here, and she responded by asking who he was. The man explained to the girl that he was a demon. Evelia was frightened and assumed that the stranger was a demon. The demon was outraged that the girl considered him a demon and stated that demons could not be compared with them. Eva was very surprised by what the man told her and wanted to know why he thought so. The stranger explained that he was one of the 72 demons who controlled the demons, but among them he was the second most important. Evelia realized that the man was still a demonic spawn. She knew what harm demons could do, and she tried to remember what the knights taught her. The girl took a frightening pose and began to growl at the man. The demon looked in bewilderment as Evelia tried to scare him and assumed that the girl was a beastman. The stranger carefully examined the girl again and realized that she did not have animal ears and a tail, and the child's claws were not sharp at all. Evelia was indignant and declared that she was human. The man asked the girl to explain to him what kind of scream she was making. The girl replied that she made a very scary and terrifying scream. The stranger laughed in response and asked Evelia if all demons laugh when they are scared. Evelia began to tug at the demon's clothes and asked him to tell him his name. The man began to say his name, but managed to pronounce only the first 3 letters and stopped. The stranger smiled welcomingly and explained to the girl that demons did not just tell their names. Evelia repeated the first 3 letters of the name the demon said, and then assumed that his name was Aga. The demon was outraged that the girl said his name incorrectly and stated that she did not dare to distort his majestic name. From the moment the girl ran off to catch the hare, the knights lost sight of her and were now looking for Evelia everywhere. The man heard the knights calling their mistress and guessed that the girl was from the family of Duke Arton, and besides, the aroma of perfume emanated from her. The demon once again carefully examined Evelia and thought that in a normal situation it would be worth killing the child right away, but not now. The stranger sat down on one knee next to the girl and friendly asked what her name was, and Evelia in response told her name to the demon. The man raised his index finger to his lips and asked Evelia to keep the fact that she had met him a secret. The demon said that he would be very grateful to the girl if she said that she saw a hare. After that, the stranger disappeared in an instant, leaving behind a small haze of an aura of dark magic, which soon dissipated. A few moments later, the knights and older brothers managed to find the girl. Arkan immediately took Evelia into his arms. The girl mysteriously touched her chin and told everyone that she had just seen a bunny here. The older brother wondered what kind of hair she saw. Avelia smiled sweetly and replied that it was a very cute bunny, and she hoped that someday she would be able to meet him again. The older brothers, along with the knights and the girl, went back to the estate, and the demon sat on a tree and watched this and repeated to himself the girl's name again. The demon ended up near the estate because he wanted to look at the Dantalians, whom people had not summoned for a long time. He was bored because the knights dealt with the demons too quickly. The man thought that he was already too old and decided to take a nap, but while he was sleeping, someone attacked him, cowardly pulling his earring. The demon once again thought about his meeting with Avelia. He believed that it had been a long time since he had met such interesting people as this girl. His name was Agares, and he was the second among the 72 demons, and was also the ruler of the eastern underworld. Before leaving, he looked again in the direction where the girl had gone and thought that they would see each other again.